Alright, so you want to play Steel Division 2. This is a pretty interesting game. Has a lot of complexity and depth, and I think there's some beauty in its complexity, which is actually quite significant. But just to be absolutely clear at the start, this video is for absolute beginners or people who haven't played the game before, and I'm just going to give you a general overview of one part of the game. And in the second video, this is a series of two parts. I will actually play the battle using some units to, further explain and demonstrate how they can be used according to what I say in this video. So without further ado, the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the battle groups. And so if we just go to the divisions here, we get a nice list of divisions. Gives you the names. You can have a click and read the flavor text that describes some interesting things about these divisions. And one thing you can pay attention to here is the rating, which can be A, B, or C. Very few C-rated divisions. But essentially all that means is that those that are rated A are generally more suited to attacking. Those that are rated B are more balanced and can do both attack and defend. And those that are rated C are considered to be stronger in a defensive playstyle. But for this one, it doesn't really matter which division I choose, so I'll choose this one. And so on this screen that we get here, we get a lot of squares or rectangles and numbers. And if you're new to the game, that probably doesn't make much sense to you. But let me just describe this to you, what we can see here. So at the top left, we've got the division rating, as I just talked about, and its name. In the middle, we have the deployment type, and this opens a drop-down list. And this is actually quite an important part of the game, definitely not to be ignored. And this is your income type, and so essentially, when you play a match or a battle, the battle takes place over what is called three phases: A phase, B phase, and C phase. A phase consists of the first 10 minutes. B phase is the 10 minutes after A phase. And then C phase is every minute after those 20 minutes, consisting of A and B phase, or phase A and phase B. So what these numbers here represent is how much income or how many points you will get to spend per minute. So for balanced, which we have here, in A phase, every minute you will get 110 points to spend. So after the game begins, you wait 1 minute, you'll be given 110 points to spend on units to bring into the battle. After those 10 minutes are up of A phase, you will then get 135 points per minute to spend in B phase for 10 minutes until B phase is over. And then every minute after that, so from 20 minutes up to even an hour, you will receive 155 points per minute to spend. And so if you just have a look at the different income types here, you should be able to recognize that different styles come with different strengths and disadvantages. Some are stronger at the start of the game, and so therefore better suited to attacking right off the bat, and some have more points available to you towards the later stages of the game. So if you'd rather build up your forces and go for a late build up assault, you'd be much better off choosing one of those income types. So this is a very important part of the game, and although it is only represented by words that say deployment type in the drop down menu, this is worth serious consideration in terms of how you design your division, what units you bring in which phase, and how much income you'll have available to you at those stages. So that being said, on the right hand side here we also have something called activation points. At the moment it says 0 out of 50 because, well, we haven't spent any of these points. What that essentially means is each card here, well, each one of these will cost 1 point. If we put a unit card into it, this will cost us 2 points. So if I just quickly throw some units into these slots here, that was 1, 1, 1, 1, and we now have 4 out of 50 activation points used up. And that's essentially how it works from a left to right basis. And all this really does, or the way it's intended to work, is each division is supposed to be stronger at some things and weaker at other things, or perhaps they're just more of a generalist division, in which case they are like a jack of all trades with no particular, specialized strength. And that is true of this division I've chosen here. We can see they don't really lack any particular type of unit so much. Perhaps the anti-air and support are a little bit low, but overall there's a good availability of units to bring in all of the different tabs. So if you're spending 1 point to get a unit card, well, that's pretty efficient. And if you're spending 4 points just for one unit card, that's quite inefficient as compared to 1 point. You're spending 4 times as many. So that's the way this is intended to work. So you fill up 50 points and then your division is built. And of course, looking at all these numbers and all of the different units that are available that all have different weapons and do different things, it's fairly understandable if all of this information is a bit overwhelming. So what you can do at the very start is to help you kind of get an understanding of what a division might look like. You can just use this autofill button at the bottom here. And if we click that, the game will automatically fill in the units up to 50 points in what it considers to be a reasonable build. Now, I'm not going to say whether this is very effective or not. A lot of the time it doesn't really hold up so well, but it's okay, it's manageable. This is the average of averagest builds, and it will probably get you through some games against the AI and maybe against other bad players, but that would probably be it. For the highest efficiency, for the most effectiveness, ideally you want to understand what your units do, and you want to choose them according to what you want them to do, according to which phase, and things like that. So that being said, the next thing we're going to look at is two of the other important aspects of building your deck, and that is deployment phase and experience. Now, I talked about the different phases, A, B, and C, and that's all that represents here. So if you bring units, or you choose to fill a card, if I take this one out and I say, okay, I'm going to bring these guys in phase B, and I add that to my battle group, in the first 10 minutes of the game, these guys will not be available for me to buy. I will have to wait 10 minutes until B phase begins before I can actually purchase these units. For every phase after the phase you bring them in, they will still remain available. So it's not like putting them into B phase means you can buy them within that 10-minute slot. That's not the way it works. It just means once this phase begins, these are available for any amount of time after that phase begins. So they don't stop being available until you've, well, maybe used them all up and they've all died. So the other thing we can look at here then when we are choosing deployment phase is this light blue number here. And if you notice, it goes up. And all this light blue number represents is how many of this unit are available to you with this card. So if I bring this card in A, I will only have, I will have 3 of these guys available to buy. So I can buy 60 points worth of this unit and then they will be exhausted. But if I bring them in B, there'll be 6 of them available. In C, there'll be 9. And each of the different units have different kinds of availability. Actually, this one's the same, so it's a bad example. Here we go. This Valentine tank has 4 availability in A and 8 availability in B. Now, it doesn't work perfectly like that because the availability is also tied to the experience, which is usually called veterancy. So these little chevrons here represent the unit's veterancy, and when I click this veterancy of 1 here, so this is 0 veterancy, this is veterancy 1, this is veterancy 2, you see the availability is going down, but you might also notice that some of these statistics here are also going up. So not all of them, things like damage haven't gone up, penetration hasn't gone up, but accuracy has gone up 10%. And the rate of fire has gone up by 5 too. And that's a pretty significant increase. However, the difference is between no veterancy, I could bring 8 of these tanks, and with 2 veterancy, I could only bring 2. So this is up for you to consider and decide. Would you rather have 2 of these when they can do, perhaps more damage, fire faster, and be more effective in the role you want them to perform? Or would you rather play it more safe and just be able to bring more of them, but perhaps they don't perform as well as you'd like them to? So there's a kind of balance you have to consider here when you're deciding which units you want to bring in which phase, and then also what kind of veterancy you want them to have as well. Bear in mind that running out of units is a pretty bad experience to have, so I would probably say at the start, if you're a beginner, it's better to bring units without veterancy just so that you don't run out. Having no infantry available in B phase, for example, will make you feel a little bit embarrassed when the enemy AI starts rolling all over you. So that's the deployment types and the veterancy, and that's applied to all of the units in all the tabs. So that's something you have to bear in mind at all times. And not all units receive the same kind of benefits. If we look at, for example, the infantry unit here, with the veterancy one here, they get an accuracy and a rate of fire bonus. If we look at things like planes, for example, the only noticeable difference here is in accuracy and then also in agility. So there's no actual rate of fire increase for planes. So you can play around with this and look at the different deployment phases and veterancy that you want and how they affect different units, because they're not all the same. And there are even some things that veterancy can affect that the game doesn't tell you about, such as infantry with higher veterancy actually take less damage, and that's unique to infantry only. It'd be nice if the game told you that, but it doesn't. That's just one of the nice little things you can learn by playing or by talking with more experienced players. So let's move on now to have a look at the different unit types and what they do. And of course I can't spend time explaining every single unit because that would actually take forever, because there are so many units, and even if I made 10 videos each an hour long, I still wouldn't be able to account for 10% of this game's depth and complexity. So I'm just going to focus on the basic idea that goes into these unit types. So let's look at recon first. What I've got here is a sniper. It says sniper team, but it's a team of one. Solo wolf, lone wolf, and strength 1 here just means how many people. If we look at the Razvedka, we can count 8 men there, and strength says 8. So if the sniper gets shot by something explosive, it's going to be pretty dead and it's gone. Can't shoot anything anymore. Razvedka, on the other hand, if they get shot by something explosive and 3 of them die, there's still 5 guys left to keep doing something. Something to bear in mind. Now, when we look at the statistics here, something we can see are 2 things called optics and stealth. Now, if you've ever played any real-time strategy game, you might be familiar with the concept of fog of war, where you can't see the whole map, and you can't see what's, on the map in terms of your opponent's units until you send units there and you have some kind of vision of that area. Steel Division 2 works similarly, but also not similarly, in that you can see the whole map at all times, but you cannot see enemy units unless one or more of your units have line of sight to that unit, and they also have enough optics or high enough optics to overcome the stealth of the unit they are trying to see. And stealth is affected by things like movement, by where they are, whether they're out in the open or in a forest or in a house, and it's also affected by what kind of unit is trying to spot them. So for example, tanks have pretty bad ability to spot things most of the time because, well, the people are stuck inside a giant metal box, and usually you can't see very well outside of a giant metal box. Infantry, on the other hand, they usually can see very well, and they will be able to spot most things at most ranges if they are recon. All recon units have a bonus to optics, and essentially that's what you're using them for. You're using them to see enemy units wherever they are, whether they're far away, hiding in a forest, or things like that. It depends on the situation. So the next one is infantry, and infantry are your defensive backbone, so to speak. You always need infantry because in almost every map there is heavy forest, and heavy forest is the one place that vehicles cannot go, but infantry can. So if you want to be able to safely pass a heavy forest, you will probably need to clear it out most of the time, and clearing it out will involve either a lot of very explosive things or, alternatively, infantry. Use your meat. So you'll send your infantry into forests and they can fight other infantry and help to clear it out. I mean, that's not their only use, but overall infantry are used to hold the line in most places, and depending on what kind of weapons they have, they can be more or less effective at killing other kinds of units. So if we take this Partisani squad as an example, this comes with 12 men, which is reasonably good, and they also come with what the game describes as anti-tank grenades. Of course, this is a Molotov cocktail and generally is not used as an anti-tank grenade, but is rather used as an anti-infantry cocktail, the most murderous kind of alcohol you'll ever consume. So these are very effective at killing infantry if they can get within the 100-meter range limitation of these Molotov cocktails. If we take, for example, a different unit such as these Gavardia DP, these guys actually come with 2 light machine guns, which have a very nice range of 750 meters, and then also an anti-tank rifle, which can shoot and penetrate lightly armored vehicles and tanks at 500 or at up to 500 meters. So all of these infantry units, have different specializations and are used in different roles. Generally, it's easy enough to have a look and look at the ranges to understand, are they going to be used better in close range or in long range or perhaps medium range. The other thing we need to have a look at here are the leaders. Now most of the time leaders aren't going to be used as actual combat units. Instead what you use them for is this leader trait they have here. And essentially what that does is, in a radius around them, it's not too big, it's not too small, the radius, but anyway, in a radius around them, any units inside the radius of these leaders will have their veterancy increased by 1. So if I have these Gavardia units, and I bring them in at 0 veterancy, but I have a leader nearby, not using the leader to fight, just keep the leader behind the front line so you can provide benefits to all the units around them. But if I have that leader, then all of these bonuses we see here, the rate of fire and the accuracy and the other hidden benefits that I talked about before, will be applied to these units. And so you can utilize these leaders to give yourself an advantage with your units without actually increasing the quantity or without spending points to bring more units out. So the next tab we have here is the tank tab, and this division comes only with a small selection of tanks. It looks like it's just MCHAs, which are the American Shermans, and the Valentine tanks. Now when we look at the armaments here, we see that this Sherman comes with 3 machine guns. That's a 2 there, so two of these Brownings, and then one of this heavy machine gun, the 12.7 millimeter. That actually has a 1,000-meter range, which is very nice. And it comes with 2 different kinds of shells. Now AP means armor piercing, and in the game, armor piercing shells can only be used against vehicles or other tanks. That's it. If you see an anti-tank gun, if you see infantry, if you see anything like that, and you only have AP shells, your unit simply will not fire. It is not allowed to use them on soft targets. HE shells, on the other hand, HE means high explosive, and these are used for soft targets. Well, actually, in the game, HE shells can be used against any target. However, the more armor a unit has, such as the 100 millimeters of frontal armor that this tank has, the less effective HE shells will be against it. So, most of the time you're not going to be using HE shells against armored targets, although you can if you want to. The other important thing that you need to look at here is the penetration value of the tank. Now, 90 millimeters of penetration is it's a little bit of a lie. It's only 90 millimeters of penetration, and if we say we're going against 100 millimeters of frontal armor, so MCHR versus MCHR, that 90 millimeters is only going to be 90 millimeters at point blank range. The further you go from your target, essentially the less penetration you have. And it doesn't work exactly like your penetration goes down, but rather the chance that your shell will penetrate enemy armor goes down the further away from your target you are. So at point blank range, the MCHR has less than 50% chance to penetrate another MCHR. So they could be shooting at each other for a little while before they penetrate even at point blank range. If they are the furthest they can be, which is 2,000 meters, they have even less chance of penetration, although it's not zero, it's just less. And you can look at the statistics for what kind of percentage chances these are online if you'd like to know what they are. The other things are things like accuracy and rate of fire. RM here is rounds per minute. So you can have a look at these and figure out how fast they fire and things like that by yourself, but I'm not going to go into any further explanation. Next tab is the support tab. This is an interesting tab. It usually comes with lots of different kind of supporting equipment, such as mortars or heavy machine guns, supply trucks, flamethrower units, although these are special flamethrower units. You see they're a very small squad, and they can actually come on a motorbike. This is actually kind of a key unit in many cases, as with a motorbike being one of the fastest units on the road, 100 kilometers an hour. If you bring these units on a motorbike at the start of the game, you can quickly get these guys into forward positions that other units might have more difficulty getting to because they're slower and they might be destroyed on the way. So these are a nice little point-taking capture unit at the start of the game when utilized in this way. The machine guns here offer the ability to cut off large areas of space or land, well, within 1,500 meters, but they only work against soft targets. So anything with armor, this machine gun will not shoot at, but infantry, other machine guns, even anti-tank guns, this machine gun will shoot them as long as it's within range, and it'll do a pretty good job of suppressing and killing those units. Things like the supply truck, well, they have two primary purposes. First one being that they can resupply ammunition, and you might have noticed here that any unit you click on that can shoot something cannot shoot indefinitely. They always have a limited amount of ammunition, whether it's bullets or shells or bombs, whatever. So this mortar, for example, can fire 54 shells of HE and 6 smoke. After it's done that, it won't fire anymore. It can't. It hasn't got any more ammunition. So what you can do then is you can buy one of these trucks, place it next to your mortar on the map, and it will then resupply. Oh, it doesn't have to be next to your mortar. It will resupply any unit you place it next to, and that's one of its primary purposes. Its second purpose is for repairing, and you might notice sometimes as you're playing that some of your vehicles can receive critical hits, such as having their transmission damaged or destroyed, having their tracks destroyed, all kinds of things like this. And if your tank's transmission is destroyed, for example, it won't be able to move anymore. If you want it to move again, because generally tanks that are stuck, not moving, are kind of sitting ducks or can't be brought to the front line to actually do something, if you want to fix your tank, you do just the same thing as you do with the ammunition. Bring your supply truck next to it, make the supply truck stop, and it will begin repairing your tank for you to get it back in fighting shape. Lovely. The last unit we can look at here is called the Commander. And the Commander works very similarly to the Leader in that it provides a veterancy increase to the units around it, except the Commander is much more expensive and it provides a veterancy increase of 2 veterancy to the units around it. So That's much stronger than the leader units. However, they are much more expensive and much more limited. Their secondary effect is that any other leaders that are within radio range, which is a large radius around the unit, any leaders in radio range of a commander will also increase the veterancy of the units around them by 2 rather than 1. So, with a commander, your leaders can also function as commanders, providing that veterancy boost of 2 veterancy. If you look at most units, the difference between no veterancy and 2 veterancy is usually quite significant. Not always, but usually quite significant. So utilizing leaders in conjunction with commanders can often provide you with a significant increase in the capabilities of your forces. Now, it is going to cost you not only points, but also time moving these units and putting them into position to do that. So it's not just a free increase for nothing. It's something you have to consider and decide whether it is worth using in your situation or for what you want to do. So that's the support tab. Next one is the anti-tank, and as the name says, this is mostly just units that are used for killing other tanks or vehicles. And in this case, it's split into 3 kinds. We have infantry, anti-tank guns, which are soft targets towed by a vehicle, and then we have tank destroyers such as the Su-85, which function similarly to a tank, except usually they have much better penetration and damage. So they're good at killing enemy tanks, usually not so great at taking hits or receiving hits. So they tend to die easily, but they also kill much better than tanks usually do. If we have a look at the anti-tank rifle team here, they come with a really nice long anti-tank rifle here. Can also come on a motorbike, which, as I mentioned before, can be used for specific purposes at the start of the game. And they only have 35mm of penetration, so they're not going to be killing many tanks. Even this Su-85 has 70mm of armor and even 45 at the sides. So it's not going to be really so much an anti-tank unit as maybe an anti-light vehicle unit. The Panzerschreck here, on the other hand, have bazookas with 200mm of penetration, in which case they absolutely will be an anti-tank unit and will kill most tanks in one hit, if not all tanks in one hit. The anti-tank guns are towed, and you can choose the vehicles they come in. And actually, I think this is something I failed to mention previously with the infantry. It's quite important, actually. Choosing the vehicles that your units come with for anti-tank units mostly just affects the speed. For example, this D-Zip comes with 95 road speed, but if we compare the Studebaker, only 70 road speed. So if we're choosing the Jeep here, this anti-tank gun is going to get into position much faster than if it was towed by a truck. Let's just have a quick look at the infantry, because this is an important aspect. If I just right click and I take this Tanko Descent Niki unit out of the lineup and I click on this drop down menu here, we can actually see there are 2 options for transport. One is an M2, which is currently unavailable because they've already been used up by other units, and the other option we have is the M2A1, an armored personnel carrier. We can see that it actually comes with a large machine gun on top. Now in most cases, the transport that units come in, if the transport does not have a weapon, then after the infantry unit unloads from the transport will disappear. However, if you use transport if you use transport that does come with a gun. Sorry, the veterancy phase deployment there was messing up my selection. If you choose vehicles that do have weapons, then after your infantry unload, this vehicle will actually stick around, and so then you get essentially well, it's not free. It costs 10 points, but you get a vehicle here that can move faster than infantry and can support them with its 1000 meter heavy machine gun in whatever situation you choose to put it into. Now, if you bring these infantry with Veterancy 1, then this armored personnel carrier will also come at Veterancy 1, and the same depending on how you change it. Now, it does cost 10 points, and this assault squad Tanko Desantniki is 20 points by itself. You bring it in the armored personnel carrier M2A1, that's going to cost you 10 points on top. It's now 30 points. Now, you don't always need to bring these armored personnel carriers or whatever other vehicles are available, depending on the division you're playing. It's up to you to decide, is this 10 points going to do something valuable for you or not? Do you want more infantry to come out and you really don't need these personnel carriers, in which case just use normal trucks? Or do you kind of have a lack of infantry and infantry support, and so having these extra machine guns near your troops would actually come really in handy? That's up for you to decide, and that's up for you that's for you to choose how to build your division. It's just one of the many decisions that you have to make while building your division. So that being said, I can go back to these anti-tank guns now, and one thing to point out here is that some anti-tank guns come with a variety of ammunition types. We see here that we have armor piercing and high explosive and APCR. APCR usually just has higher penetration for lower damage. Let's compare. There we go. Up to 8 but down to 105. And you can choose which one you want the unit to fire. That's up to you. You can enable and disable them manually in game. But this particular tank destroyer can also use its HE shells to fire on soft targets. However, when we look at the ZIS-2 57mm here, it only comes with armor piercing shells, which means any soft targets, whether they are in line of sight, close or far away, doesn't matter. This anti-tank gun will not fire, cannot fire at any soft targets whatsoever. So something to bear in mind when both choosing the unit and when choosing to bring it out. This will not shoot at any infantry, will not shoot at any other anti-tank guns, will only shoot at enemy vehicles, tanks, light armored vehicles, things like that. So it's an important point to remember, especially if you're new to the game. That being said, that's most of what the anti-tank does. Fairly self-explanatory, I think. Next one is AntiAir, which also I think is fairly self-explanatory. You generally tend to get two different kinds of anti-air unit. Those that are mounted on a vehicle, like this one, and this one is even armored, so it can it can survive more hits than a unarmored vehicle could. And it has a range of 1800 meters and 4 nice guns on top there. If we compare to the artillery 37mm here, it has a much greater range, and of course higher caliber means more explosions, more damage if it hits. And you can also choose different vehicles to bring it with. You can even bring it with another anti-air truck. Now, these Dushka trucks are not exactly very effective anti-air, but if you can bring 2 anti-air units in one card rather than just one, most of the time that's worth it. 2 for 1. You get more bang for your buck. But it's up to you to decide, again, phase availability, veterancy, and whether you want something more mobile in the beginning or in the middle or later, or whether you're happy having fairly stationary anti-aircraft guns. Although they're not stationary, you see these two guys are ready to push this big heavy bad boy, but they're gonna do it pretty slowly. You imagine trying to push this thing across some grass. You're not gonna have a good time. It is doable though. It does move, just very slowly. And so there's some difference in maneuverability between these two kinds of units, and that's also something that you would need to think about. Onto the artillery tab here, we have a few different kinds of units usually here. I'm not going to explain everything like I said before, but just a general overview. So we have some things like mortars. They have a fairly short range, or short for in artillery terms, but the rate of fire is quite high, so it fires quite fast and it aims quite fast too. If you compare the mortar to the howitzer here, the F-22 howitzer, we see the howitzer actually does not have any number in the range category, which means it can fire anywhere. As soon as you bring it onto the map, it can fire to the opposite side of the map, no problem. However, one drawback is that the further away your artillery fires from where it is placed, the greater the inaccuracy. So it might be able to fire across the map, but it will not be able to do so very accurately, and its shells will be spread out over a ridiculously large area if you make it fire very far away. So no matter what the range, an important consideration is that you bring your units fairly close to the area you want to be shooting at in order to increase accuracy and to make sure your artillery hits the things that you actually want to hit. And what things are you going to want to hit with artillery? Well, most of the time that's going to be the things that are behind the front line, that are kind of out of range of the units that you currently have available. And that could be things like anti-air, it could be anti-tank guns, it could be other artillery, it could be a commander that you spotted hiding in the back somewhere. It's a great variety of things for you to shoot at. But that's generally their purpose. You could also use them just to saturate an area with high explosive shells, and that's going to be very effective against soft targets like infantry. So if you notice a large buildup of soft targets within a certain area, throwing a bunch of HE shells on top of them is probably going to be pretty effective. The other thing we have here is a special kind of artillery unit, which is called an off-map artillery. We can see that here. And so this unit itself, this Jeep, doesn't actually do anything. To use this unit, you actually have to bring it within its radio range, or you have to bring it to the front line, and its radio range has to extend essentially over the things you want to destroy. With that part completed, you then have the option to bring in a large artillery barrage over a large area just by pointing and clicking, and then a bunch of high explosive shells will shortly fall on that area, usually after around 30 seconds or so. And this is also very effective at taking out large concentrations of enemies without having to buy multiple artillery units to achieve the same effect. So it has limited uses in this off-map, usually 2 or 3 uses that you can use it for, and then it's out, it's done. It can't be refilled, it can't be used again, it's finished. Whereas artillery units, they can have their ammunition refilled, they can continue shooting the whole game as long as you can keep giving them ammunition. But to achieve the same effect as an off-map, you would probably need at least 6 of these howitzers. And even then, you're going to be spending a lot of points to do that, and you still might not achieve the effect that you wanted. You have an interesting unit here. By comparison, you have the normal infantry mortar team that can be pulled by a variety of vehicles, or you have the mortar that is attached to a motorbike. So this is a nice little bit of maneuver warfare you can engage in by quickly moving your motorbike mortar into position, firing some HE shells over a ridge into a bunch of enemies, and then just moving your motorbike away so that it doesn't receive any counter battery fire. And then one more unit we have here is a rocket launcher, MLRS. And what this does is it shoots rockets. It does what it says on the tin. This one has quite small rockets, but it does have 24 of them. And the range is 5,300 meters, but the same rule applies as to all infantry. The further you are from your target, the less accurate you will be. So if you want to shoot something with a bunch of rockets, don't shoot at maximum range, or most of them are likely to miss, and you will not achieve the effect you want. Ideally, move it as close as you can to the enemy you want to shoot, and then fire it, and you'll probably get much better results. Alright, that's artillery. One more, just the air units. And generally air units are separated into maybe 2 or 3 kinds. you have the fighters, and most of the time fighters are used to kill enemy air units, or if they have this close air support trait, they can also be used fairly effectively against soft targets on the ground. The other units that you get are bombers of various kinds. This one has napalm bombs, good for killing soft targets. This one has some frag rockets. This IL-4 actually has a 1000 kg HE bomb. So, napalm, quite small bombs, good for killing soft targets. This IL-4, however, is very slow for a plane, but a 1000 kg HE bomb will kill almost anything it lands on, including heavy tanks. So you're trying to balance what you need in which phase. Usually the heavier the bombs they have, the less availability you have according to phase. So if you look at phase A for this IL-4, you can bring one of them, but in B you can bring 4. The light fighter bombers here are very effective as a kind of quick response force. And what I mean by that is, often you'll be faced with a situation where perhaps a previously unseen anti-tank gun is giving your tank some trouble, and you don't really have a quick solution to fix that for yourself, and if you don't fix it quickly, your tanks are gonna die. Now, this fighter bomber moves at 480 kilometers an hour. It can quickly cover the distance across the map, drop its bombs onto this thing, this soft target that is giving you trouble, and that will usually kill most anti-tank guns or infantry assault guns, and it can then just evacuate and leave. So it quickly takes out these targets that are causing you issues. And in the main game options, if you turn off what's called the Winchester evacuation, and normally after dropping bombs, if that option is turned on, your plane will automatically evacuate. But if you turn it off after your plane drops its bombs, it can then hang around and use its machine guns on other soft targets. So maybe you come in and you drop your bombs and kill an anti-tank gun, and then you fly across the map to the other side, and you have it strafe some infantry with its machine guns, and it kills that infantry unit too. And you can keep repeating like this until your opponent brings out some anti-air, or alternatively a fighter of their own to shoot your own plane down. So there are multiple uses for fighter bombers. Heavy bombers tend to be used for heavier targets, and fighters for the most case are used for shooting down enemy planes, or also for close air support. You also do get some recon planes which can be used as recon. They're good at spotting units on the ground. And there we have it. That's most of the units. Well, not most, that's all of the units for this division anyway. Not all of them, but the basics of what they do and what you can use them for. I'm not going to go over the defensive units here because that's only used for the breakthrough mode, which is not so popular, and they're fairly simple to use anyway. So I hope that helps you to get a basic understanding of what we're looking at when we try to build a division here, and how we think about which different units to bring for what purpose, and what availability you want compared to what veterancy you want, and then everything combined together with what's available early in the game versus late in the game, and then comparing that to the income type that you chose. So that's it for this video. Next video will actually be in the battle, using some of the units to, properly explain and demonstrate how they are used. But that's it. So hope you enjoyed watching, and come back next time.